I don't think there's ever been a time in history where life has moved as fast as it does right now. And particularly for men, it seems like success is defined by how fast your life is moving, how quickly you're making money, how many hours you can work, how fast your car is, how many women you've had, how quickly you've had them. But I feel like increasingly the secret to a happy, fulfilled life as a man today is to actually take things down slow. And I've noticed a trend online where women are starting to pick up onto the slow living and men haven't really caught up to it. And maybe it's because there is this conception or this misconception that to be slow living would be to avoiding work. It would be to not be ambitious, to be lazy. But I actually find that completely contradictory to the truth. This obsession with speed is leaving our brains completely fried. It's leaving us feeling lost. We're being pulled in 1,000,001 different directions at breakneck speed. And then we have so many men left wondering, is this what life was all about? Is this what it was for? Is this what success actually looks like? So I want to start by talking about how to actually begin living slower and exactly what slow living looks like on a practical level. The first step is definitely to eliminate the distractions, right? Remove those things that are pulling your brain, driving that dopamine, making you do things that you don't even necessarily want to do. It's just out of impulse, right? And the phone is by far the biggest culprit for most people. Not only just notifications, but especially the social media scrolling. It's making our brains move and react a lot faster than they were designed to do, especially compared to doing something just like reading a book, for example, where it requires your brain to actually slow down. Probably the biggest and most important element of this would be to embrace boredom. Do you remember when you were a child? And I hope that you were raised without iPads and video games and all of that stuff. Maybe some of you weren't. But do you remember when you were a child and you would be on a long car journey and there would be nothing to do apart from look out the window, maybe for hours? And when you're a child, 2 hours feels like 10 hours to an adult. But I remember being that child, and I remember having very basic kind of old-fashioned toys. And as a result, the places that my mind would go were wildly creative, wildly imaginative. And as adults, we still have that power within us, but we're not even allowing our brain the room to think. And to give it that room, we have to allow it to be bored. We have to allow our minds to wander, not to ruminate in a negative way, not to be trapped in negative thought cycles, but simply to explore ideas, to give ourselves the freedom to go different places, to wander down avenues, to get down rabbit holes, be lost in thought. Because especially for creative people or business people, this is actually where our best ideas lie, but we have to give them the silence to be heard. You could do a lot more with a lot less. You probably don't need more information to go and do the things that you're thinking about, whether it's getting in better shape, whether it's being more successful with women, more successful in your career. You probably have a lot of answers within you that you're A, not listening to, and B, not acting on, because you're constantly overloading yourself with extra noise, with extra information. The art of slow living requires you to actually put into practice the things that you already know. Now let's take the example of a book. Most people don't even read books anymore. And as Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, there will be no need to ban books because people simply won't want to read them anymore. But let's take the example of a book. Most people would rather consume micro chunks of information at breakneck speed via TikTok or YouTube Shorts, rather than sit down and actually study and absorb that book and live with it for an extended period of time. Read it 3 or 4 times over. You know, this isn't even one of the best books around, but I remember I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad maybe 4 or 5 times just in a row, repeatedly, getting that information into my mind. And I got so much more value out of that experience than I would have done if I had, let's just say, consumed a few clips by the author on TikTok. And this Midwestern summer is hot, so let me take this jacket off. To really demonstrate the art of slow living, let me walk you through a typical day in the life of a man who lives slow and compare that to the life of a man who lives fast, right? So let's say the slow living man, he wakes up, let's say 6 o'clock, okay? But he doesn't go on his phone. In fact, his phone doesn't wake him up. He has an alarm clock, or he wakes up with the sunrise. He gets out of bed. He has a shower. He has a grooming routine. He uses a double-edged razor. He takes the time to shave properly, to groom himself properly, to prepare himself for the day. He goes for a walk outside. No AirPods, no distractions, just getting the sunlight in his eyes, smiling, waving at his neighbors, saying hello to people. Then he comes home. He takes the time to cook himself a healthy breakfast. And all while he's doing these things, most people would be doing them while scrolling on social media, while listening to music, while having the news on. The slow living man just does these things as monotasks, right? No multitasking, just one thing at a time so that you can give it its due focus and due attention. He commutes to work, and while he's on that journey, he's thinking and strategizing about the day. He's planning it in his mind. He gets to work early so that when he arrives at his desk, he can do tasks that he knows are important to him and that are strategic, rather than just being instantly bombarded with Slack notifications, emails, and demands from his boss. At lunchtime, he doesn't queue up at the Sweet Green or the Chipotle. He doesn't DoorDash anything to his office. He simply finds a quiet park or a bench and eats a homemade, healthy lunch that either he's made or his wife has made for him, preferably the latter. When he gets home, I've noticed that so many people have this habit of, I understand feeling a little mentally exhausted, mentally drained when you get home from work, but so many people get into this habit of instantly lying horizontal on the sofa, opening up TikTok or YouTube Shorts, whatever your poison may be of choice, and just scrolling, maybe for half an hour at the least, 1 or 2 full hours at the worst. But the slow living man doesn't do this. He might instead go for a neighborhood walk to refresh his mind, to reset his mental state. He may engage in a productive hobby, whether that's going to a martial arts class or a dancing class. Maybe it's a solo hobby like playing the guitar, or maybe instead he simply reads, or he does an activity like playing chess, which requires you to slow down, focus, and be in the moment. You know, one of the reasons that I think I love cigars so much, and I actually call these slow sticks to myself, because the whole ritual of lighting it and sitting down and enjoying it, it forces you to slow down and be very present in the moment. And I deliberately keep them to these kind of slower moments of reflection. I don't want to smoke one while I'm on the golf course. I don't want to smoke one while I'm working necessarily. I prefer to just sit and be present with the cigar or with the conversation. When it comes to the meal times, the man who lives slow takes the time to either prepare a meal for himself or to be with the woman or the family that's prepared the meal for him. I think it's such a lost art that families or couples would sit down together and eat and just be fully present with each other, not watch TV, not watch a YouTube video or have their AirPods in or be scrolling on their phones. Just sit and have that 30 minutes of meal time as a sacred time to be present and to engage in quality conversation with each other. And the slow living man certainly turns off all devices well before his bedtime. He has a relaxing evening routine. Maybe he takes a shower, maybe he studies a little Bible, maybe he reads some fiction books to help him unwind, maybe he prays, but he goes to bed and he bookends that day just as he started it, without distractions, but with a kind of poise and a relaxed calm that helps him prepare for sleep. Now, depending on who you are, this may sound either very familiar and very similar to your current day, or it might sound wildly different. But let me just talk you through a few benefits that I've noticed to slow living and how it's actually helping me work harder and even be more successful in my career. The first one is because living slow introduces the concept of deep work. You can't argue that responding to every single notification, picking up your phone 80 times a day is helping you perform better in your career. What will actually move the needle for you is if you're able to dedicate, even if it's just 2 to 3 hours every single morning of deep, focused, uninterrupted work on the most important and most difficult task. This is a level of focus and attention that most people will never even get into. Most people are just always engaged in shallow tasks because everything's moving too fast and they are distracted. And doing great work doesn't mean to work fast necessarily. Look at great novels. They are written slowly. They're written incrementally. Because a lot of the best work, in whatever domain you have, I think it might be about to rain, whatever domain you exist in, the best work typically happens in your head, right? It's the strategy. The actual pushing of the buttons is important and it has to be done, but it's not the thing that moves the needle the most. So for me, living slow allows me to have that sacred time of 3 to 4 hours every single morning where I can focus on the most important tasks. And for me, it will be things like recording videos, maybe editing videos, creating course material in the Gentleman's Institution. But whatever I know will require the most concentration, whatever I know I could easily be distracted from or kind of not want to do later in the day, that's the time that I use in the morning to think slow and move strategically. Living slow will actually give you a sharper energy. When you're moving fast all of the time, it's like you're leaking energy from all different directions because people are draining things from you, both people actually in your life and also distractions, social media companies, etc. They're all taking little chunks out of you throughout the day. When you live slow, you have this calm stillness to you. I noticed that I used to be a lot more emotionally volatile and my energy would have kind of highs and lows where I'd be feeling rather manic and very pumped up and very energetic, but I didn't really have that focus. Whereas now it's like a slow, steady state of calm energy that doesn't have these highs and lows. It's just consistently there. And that's so much easier to work with, especially when it comes to doing stuff that is more focused and actually creative. I also did want to talk about decision making. So obviously being more calm and emotionally steady helps with decision making. But think about this. A man needs time to reflect. He needs time to sit and be with his thoughts and go over possibilities and plan out his next move. A great example of a man who lived rather slow was Winston Churchill. If you look at his daily routine, even during wartime, he's taking a lot of walks around the garden. He is napping. He doesn't even get out of bed until quite late in the day, which is not necessarily something I'd recommend. But the point is, he was able to win the war for Britain in his mind. It was a game of strategy. And if you don't allow yourself the time to slow down and think, your decisions will always be made on very shallow information and you're much more likely to make bad moves. When I think about some of the worst decisions that I've either made or nearly made, it's always when I was thinking on a very shallow level and I wasn't allowing myself the time to sit down and actually plot out my next move. To plan and to scheme is so important for a man. Think of yourself like the CEO of a company. You don't want the CEO to constantly be working on low-level tasks, things that he could easily delegate. You want the CEO to be sitting there and thinking and planning and setting the direction for the company. Well, you are the CEO of your life, so make sure that you have those little board meetings with yourself in your mind where you sit and think about where you're headed in the future and maybe some of the things that you need to change right now. Now, the man who lives slow develops a very calm yet strong and magnetic presence. When you look at the men from the old movies that I often cite and I love, men like Gregory Peck, Sean Connery, Gary Cooper, they have a very slow, strong presence about them. Even the way that they speak and the way they move, it's very unhurried, it's very unrushed. And there's something about that that is just so magnetizing and so charming. I remember walking through the airport the other day, and obviously most people just had their head buried in their phones. But for the people that didn't, I noticed that everybody was looking at me, making eye contact with me. And when I'd smile at them, they would smile back. And I felt this large presence in this airport terminal. And I don't say that to be big-headed, because when you live slow, it actually gives you the opportunity to feel love, to feel gratitude, to feel calm. And these are all gifts that you give to other people with your energy and with your presence. When you're distracted all the time, when your mind is racing, when you're rushing about physically, you don't have the opportunity to give anything to anybody else. You don't have the space for love, for gratitude. So, of course, people won't see that in you. So if you want to be that kind of shining light, that kind of beautiful lighthouse, powerful presence in any room, you need to slow down your entire life. As a negative example of this, there's a guy that lives in my building. He's a business type. He's an Indian guy. He's always wearing a suit. I think he works at a consulting firm around here. And this is one of the rudest people I've ever encountered in my life. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he's always in a rush. I've noticed his breathing is kind of shallow and fast. He will bump into people in the elevator without apologizing. He won't hold the door open for people. He has no spatial awareness. He's completely impolite. He won't say good morning back because he's too caught up in his own bullshit. He's too caught up in Slack messages. He's too caught up on rushing to the next meeting. He is not allowing himself the space. And I don't say this to be mean. I actually say this because I feel sorry for people like this, that they haven't realized that he could be just as productive, get just as much work done, and be a much nicer presence in the world if he just slowed the hell down a little. And finally, to live slow is to live in a way that's sustainable and healthy. When I look at the way that some men are doing things in their 20s, they're working 12-hour days, which, I commend. Like, I love the work ethic, I love the grind, but to do that fueled by caffeine, to be fueled by Zyn, especially, my gosh, I hate that stuff so much. To be fueled by caffeine, Zyn, to be fueled by adrenaline, that is going to ruin your nervous system. And you're really borrowing time from the future in order to move faster today. Whereas when you live slow, when you move about in a steady, intentional way, you can keep doing that forever. I mean, I personally almost never really take a day off because I've set up my life in a way that I don't need to take a day off. I can work at my usual pace every single day and never get exhausted. I don't need to consume a lot of caffeine because I make sure that I sleep properly. I certainly don't need to consume Zyn because my mind has a calm, sharp focus already. And actually, probably one thing I don't really like about cigars is the fact that they do have nicotine in them. I find that the amount I smoke, it doesn't really seem to affect my mental state too much. But if you've ever had maybe 2 or 3 cigars in a row, you really get that head rush. And that's something that I personally don't like. And I just don't feel like I need it. I'd rather be on a steady, calm, sharp level rather than have these erratic zigs and zags of my energy levels. So think about it. If maybe you are a man who's working 10, 12 hours a day, you're drinking a lot of coffee, you're skipping on sleep, you're being fueled on adrenaline, do you want to live that way for a long time? And if not, then when do you think it's going to stop? Because there are men in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s who are still doing that. I have this thing, and I don't really know what to call it yet, but there's this fallacy, I believe, of things will be different in the future. I'm doing this now to get me through this certain phase, but in the future I won't do it. I've rarely seen that happen. When people neglect a certain area of their life to get through a certain phase, they neglect that area of their life for the rest of their lives. It's much better instead to think about how do you want your life to be in the long term, and how can you make that happen now? If you think you want a certain lifestyle in the future, how can you bring yourself as close to that as possible now. And one thing that I think social media has been really bad for is that it has glamorized the fast life for men. You see these influencers, they're in Dubai, they've got the flashy cars, they've got the women, they are boasting about not only how much money they make, but also how hard they've worked, how hard they've hustled to get it. You've got young guys my age taking TRT, taking testosterone. It's just completely ridiculous. That's definitely not the life that I want for myself, and because I know that, I'm not bringing my current life in any direction that's going anywhere near that. If anything, I feel like my life is slowing down increasingly, and I'm starting to visit these places like Charleston, where I was last week. I'm going to Texas, to Austin next week. I'm going to these places where life is a little bit slower, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I think the trick as a man is to be able to combine this slow, mindful living with still being very hardworking and ambitious. Because, yeah, slow living, especially when I see women talking about it, it can be a little bit soft. It can be about maybe not working as hard, maybe not as putting as much pressure on yourself. I don't think that's what slow living should be about as a man. It's simply about being intentional. It's about not draining your energy on stuff that isn't worthwhile, pursuing things that aren't meaningful. Instead, you take all of that power, all of that energy, and you focus it on something that's important, and you go about things in a steady, methodical, and thoughtful way. A lot of the ideas that I've shared with you in today's video actually came from a group call that I had within the Gentleman's Institution. This is my private community and network and support system for any man that aspires to be a modern gentleman, any man that's on that path. If you want to be connected with like-minded men, we've got guys in that group from Chicago down to Sydney, Australia, that are meeting up, having lunch together, having drinks together, and actually forming really solid friendships with other guys that level them up. You might find that it's hard right now to meet guys that are on your wavelength or are the kind of people that you want to actually be around. The Gentleman's Institution is the place where you will find them. Just as I record this, we're about to hit our 100th member. And when you join, you'll also be able to do the group calls with me twice a week. And you'll get access to this 12-week modern gentleman journey that I've created. It's a course and there's a challenge associated with it so that you actually implement everything that you're learning into your life. And of course, the philosophy of slow and intentional living runs throughout the entire program. You'll find the link in the description to check that out. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.